Hello, everyone. Welcome to Family Matters. We're so excited to have you join us today. For this episode today, we're joined by Bronwyn Keller, occupational therapist and project coordinator with MSOTR Health Tools. We are glad to have you. Before we jump into our topic today, can you share a little bit more about you and your background?
Sure. I'm excited to be here, by the way. I am an occupational therapist who has specialized in the field of geriatrics for the last 25 years. I won't say how long I've been an OT. We'll just leave it at that. As an occupational therapist, my focus is on helping individuals be as independent as possible in the things that they do every day. In addition to being an OT, I also have experience as being a full-time caregiver. I took care of my mom for a number of years who lived with vascular dementia. So I kind of have a mixed background, and being a caregiver has really, I think, I don't want to say enhanced, but it really has expanded my perspective when it comes to caregiving and the needs of people that are caring for other people.
Thank you for sharing that. That leads into our topic today, which is my routine matters too. The caregiver struggle to get it all done. Bronwyn, from what you shared with your experience as an occupational therapist and as a caregiver, you have a lot of experience with this topic. Would you like to share a little bit more before we jump in with questions?
Yes, thanks. I just want to start off by recognizing the fact that for individuals that are responsible for caring for other people, that is really important work. And for the families that are out there, you may not know this, but you're part of a community of 38 million family caregivers, 38 million who provide love and care and support for family members. And caregiving is really hard work, and it often requires sacrifice. And most of the time, for family members, for you guys that are out there, you're not getting reimbursed. You're not getting any compensation from a financial standpoint for the work that you do. So just a special nod of recognition to all the families who are kind of listening today. And I'm excited to talk about habits and routines and how that might influence caregiver roles, and maybe we'll have a few tips today that we can talk about.
Okay, so you mentioned the habits and routines, which seem to play into our topic. Can you define what these mean and just share a little bit more about why this is important?
Well, daily routines are really how we kind of manage every single thing that we do all the time. And that means routines are also really important to caregivers. So let me first mention the difference just between a habit and a routine. We talk about habits. These are the things that we think in terms of like behaviors. They might be healthy, they might be unhealthy, that are kind of instinctual. We don't even think about them. For example, I use an electric toothbrush, and I've used one for several years. However, when I use my electric toothbrush, I still brush my teeth as if I had an old toothbrush in my hand. It's a habit, and it's just something that I do that I don't even think about. Routines, on the other hand, they're activities that we do every day that provide kind of structure to the way that we do things. We get up, we go through our morning routines. We might go to the bathroom, brush our teeth, we bathe, we dress. We sort of have routines in terms of how we do these tasks. And it's not just morning routines. We have routines that go on throughout the day. How we eat our meals, what direction we take in a grocery store. That's sort of a routine way we do things. Even when people mow a yard, they tend to mow their grass the same way that they do them in a very set routine. So we have routines for many of our daily living tasks that have kind of a purpose to them. Routines basically help us get things done. Even if we don't enjoy the task, we still have routines around them. Our routines can also influence our health. Like we take our medicine, we go to the gym, we do brain exercises, we eat a salad every day. All of these things, routines can be healthy, or they might not be healthy. But we don't always pre-plan or think about our routines. Sometimes they just kind of evolve over time.
Okay, that's very helpful to understand the difference, but how they're still important and how there are some similarities. Establishing routines sure seems like an important aspect of caregiving. Can you explain further a few examples of routines as related to the caregivers?
Well, if you think about it as a caregiver, you have probably multiple routines that are all built around helping. And these routines may only involve helping a family member, let's say maybe once a week. Maybe you're helping somebody just by helping your family member get their groceries. You might not do that every day, but you might do that once a week. Or you may be responsible and take on the task of calling a family member and checking in on them every single day. So you might have a daily task that way. Or you could, as a family member, be a full-time caregiver. And these routines can be real involved. They may involve helping your family member get out of bed in the morning, routines for personal hygiene and care, getting in and out of the car, how you keep track of appointments. The more responsibilities you take on in caregiving, the more complex your routines can basically become. So as a caregiver, you've got routines for yourself, you have routines for your family member, and there may even be other people involved in these routines, such as a friend or other family members or paid caregivers. So routines can get really complex.
And then managing it all. So managing your routine, managing the caregiver's routine, managing, the individual's routine.
Mhm.
So what happens, the term caregiver and caregiving often is associated with taking care of persons with dementia, like how you mentioned you took care of your mom with dementia. Can you explain any kind of strategies for making routines simpler? You mentioned how it can get complex. So is there any ways that they can make these routines more manageable and just simpler overall for the individual and for their caregivers?
Well, the first thing that we can do is recognize that we need to plan. In planning a routine for a loved one with dementia is really complicated and there's a lot of facets to that. But basically, the more we plan and organize what we do, and with the routines that they do every day, then we can make it simple for their end. And a real key to doing that is, it seems kind of silly, but is consistency. And that means routines need to be done the same time every day, that we can complete the steps that we do in a routine if we do those in the same order. And if we can organize things, the task itself, in the same way. The idea is that if we can repeat, and repeat the process or the steps of how a routine is done, then that actually makes it easier for our family member to actually do the steps to the task. So if you help your family member automatically engage in a task because they do it the same way all the time, then that really helps them. Even if they can't verbalize that those steps are familiar, but by doing it the same way all the time really can help.
Sure, then they know what to expect. You know what to expect. The caregiver knows what to
Mm-hmm.
expect.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So, consistency is important based on what you're saying when caring for persons with dementia. How does that consistency affect the individual's overall routines and their habits?
Well, basically, doing the same routine helps your family member actually do tasks better. And by this, I mean that the reason that it's helpful is that the more consistent the routine, the less problems your family member is faced with when you're doing the routine. So, for example, if you base a routine on what somebody's able to do, then they don't have to solve any problems or face any challenges when they're doing the routine. And that's a good thing, particularly for people with dementia. Your family member can move like from one aspect to a task to another and not get frustrated because they're doing something that's too hard for them or something that's not familiar. So if your family member, for example, let's say they really struggle with buttoning and they get frustrated, and that, it's something that they can do, but it creates a real challenge for them in the routine, and they tend to abandon. Once they get frustrated, they don't want to do anything else. So in this case, then what you might want to do is think about what can they do? Well, buttoning is the challenge and it's hard. So maybe we just, in this routine, we want to get rid of buttoning. We want to change the type of shirt that they're wearing. Maybe you could put on pullover shirts that don't have buttons on them at all. Or maybe it's a point where you just say, let me do the buttoning for you. And that way you're helping somebody do them and you're taking that frustration away. So the first thing is you want to make sure that your routine that you're working on with somebody is based on what they can do and what's not frustrating for them. And even if you're helping them, if you help them in the same way, that consistency helps.
Okay.
Another I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to say there's another reason that it's good to do things in a consistent way, and that it, quite frankly, it feels better. It's more secure, it's familiar, it's less frightening. And all of those things can help with your relationship when you're doing those routines, because it's not something that's different from them. They don't have to be anxious. And there's a third thing that really helps with consistency. And this is the common sense piece too, is that when you do things the same way every time, you actually are more efficient. You have everything you need handy, you know how to do it, you know as the caregiver how long it's going to take, and you can move from tasks to tasks, and you also don't have to problem solve things as much. And so the real benefit to the caregiver is that it's far more efficient to do things the same way all the time, even for you. And so when we think about, the bottom line is adaptability for somebody with a thinking skill problem or dementia is really not one of their strong suits. And so consistency helps kind of reduce their need to be adaptable as much. And so therefore they can do better.
Hey, that's very helpful. So consistency is just important for all individuals, especially for those with dementia. I think about, when I go on vacation and you're out of your routine,
Mm-hmm.
and
Exactly.
you don't have that consistency. So that's even intensified and made worse for those individuals with dementia. Do you have any other tips or strategies for our families listening in that may help with caring for persons with dementia?
Well, there are an awful lot. I'll just kind of stick a little bit here in talking in terms of routines. But besides just designing a routine that's familiar, I mean, we're doing this routine the same way. If you can do a routine that is familiar to a person, and if you can think about their preferences and how they do things in establishing a routine, making it very personal for them, that can really help, is an important part in establishing a routine. So for example, we always talk about, when people have preferences with how they get ready in the morning. We may have people that shower in the morning and people that shower at nighttime. And we have people that like to sing in the shower and maybe they need to have music in there. The point is you want to make a routine as personal as possible so that the individual can feel comfortable. And that the other thing is when you're doing a routine with somebody is that you want to keep it comfortable for them and familiar and make choices so that they're doing it the way they like it. But you also want to pay attention to how they respond to the routine so that it's not just the fact that the routine gets done. It's the fact that the person is engaged in doing it and they're not stressed in the process. If they get really agitated or stressed or frustrated, then you have to really back away and you have to say it's okay not to force that routine a certain direction. So you want the person, when you're doing any kind of routines throughout the day, to feel good and to feel like what they're doing is calm and isn't really stressful. Another consideration that you have to do in terms of planning a routine is you have to think in terms of what can be done independently, safely, or what requires help. So for example, my mom, when I was doing showers with her, she could wash herself up sitting on a bench. She could stand up and down. She could do a lot of her personal bathing things herself. But she needed help from a safety standpoint with getting in and out of the shower. She couldn't manage her water temperature. She couldn't control that so that she didn't get burned or it was too, so we had to watch that. She also couldn't control the handheld shower head without the water going all over the place. So I had to establish a routine that fit her abilities, that with me helping her, but also allowed her to do the things that she could do herself. So you have to consider safety and independence in your routine as well. And the third consideration that you have to have is you kind of have to know why you're doing a routine and make sure that you're selecting what you're doing for the right reasons. For example, we can talk about showering again. When you work with someone and they're, they're getting a shower in the morning and you say, okay, what's the purpose of a shower? If the purpose of a shower is to just get clean, then it may be that you're not, maybe, and they're really agitated and are uncomfortable with a shower, then maybe you need to think about if the whole purpose of the routine is just to get clean, maybe what we'll do is we'll just wash at the sink and we won't do foot care at the sink. We won't shave right away. We will do those things at a different time. So the idea is that you figure out what's your biggest priority to make sure if you're working with someone with a thinking skill issue and a family member that, may not tolerate doing a whole lot of things at once, do your most important thing first, and then figure out how to build those other things into other routines.
Okay. I know that routines can often change depending on the abilities of the older adult and external factors such as new illnesses, new medications, etc. Do you have any strategies on how to navigate these changes and how, as a caregiver, how do they adjust with these changes? Because it affects their routine.
Yes, well, it's probably one of the most stressful times, I think, for a caregiver. At least I found this, was that when you have all your routines established and your family member then gets worse, something new happens. They have a urinary tract infection or they have a mild stroke or something else happens that changes, and that disrupts everything. And that is, like, to me, the most stressful time, was the most stressful time, because you had to readapt everything and you didn't know if you could do it. Like, can I do this? Am I going to be able to manage this routine? So, and then at that time too, you also get a lot of, I would say, recommendations or encouragement from other professionals that are helping your family member, maybe a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, or like you are, Abby, as a speech pathologist. They give you suggestions and things that you should do. And sometimes it's really overwhelming to have all of these suggestions because the stress comes that you feel like you have to do all these things. And so, you may have a PT that comes along and say, well, you should walk your dad for, twice a day outside when the weather's nice, long walks. And, it takes a lot of assistance to do that. It may take a lot of assistance to even get him outside the door, let alone take another long walk. So the idea is that when changes happen, you have to adapt your routines, and that can be stressful. But the expectations of others and things that you have to build into your routines is another added piece to that. So what I really suggest is for you to think about your routines and think about all the things that you have to do. And when new things come in, is to really talk about them. Bring those issues up, your routines, your limitations, your abilities, your time, build that into the discussion, not just what is best for your family member. And I hate to say it that way, but in a way it's true. You've got to be able to do these things too. So, for example, the walking issue with having to walk a long distance and do all these other, which are great recommendations and really useful things to do, it may be that you could discuss and say, is there another way I can do this? I have to, my dad goes to the bathroom really frequently, and maybe, I can't do much walking when we go into the bathroom because he's in a hurry. So I'm not going to walk him in because he's got to get there right away. Or it may be say, but when he's coming out, he's done, he's ready. I could put the wheelchair, much further from the bathroom, and we could take our walks multiple times a day after he goes to the bathroom. I'm already there. So that's a good time for me to build the walking in. So the idea is build the tasks into what you're already doing. And if you're not getting recommendations that way, it may be hard for you to prioritize. So get other people to help you prioritize and break it apart. And so you're still doing what's beneficial for your dad, but you're also fitting it in your routine.
Well, you just said how you're fitting it in and you're making sure, okay, if dad needs to walk and there's not enough time, by the time he gets to the bathroom, okay, how about after the bathroom and then in between, these tasks, or maybe in between meals. So that brings me to the
Exactly.
next question is, you hear the term use it or lose it. And how does this play into the caregiver role for the older adult? You kind of touched on that a little bit. Is it easier just to do it for them? Or is it best for them to let it, to do it on their own, even if a little support is needed?
Well, that's a big problem and a big challenge, because we know that it's always good for people to do things for themselves. And that's the ideal. If you don't use it, as you say, you lose it, and you want someone to do everything that they can do for themselves. But for anybody out there who at one point was a parent and had a 3-year-old child, and the child is getting ready in the morning and you're going to work. So the question comes up, do you have your 3-year-old child do every single thing that they can possibly do for themselves at 3? Even though this is very different than working with a family member with dementia, but the idea is you don't always have the time. So realistically, you have to choose. What is it that you going to encourage your child to do? Are they going to brush their teeth? And that's going to be what you're doing, or are you going to actually do it for them so you can help them get dressed? So you have to make those decisions. And it's the same as a caregiver when you're caring for anybody. So the idea is that it's not always black and white. Every task has different values to the person. So walking and standing and transferring, getting from one spot to another may be more important than other things. And so you might focus on those skills, and maybe other things you might let go. So it just depends on the tasks. And the other thing is that there are tasks that you can do that you can still benefit from, that maybe are in between doing them independently and doing them or not doing them at all. For example, you may have somebody that can do exercises. And if I'm doing exercises, I might have to direct those exercises, each exercise separately, each one. That's really time consuming. And it's really hard as a caregiver to spend 30 minutes, even if you might be benefiting from the exercises as well. Sometimes it's kind of hard to do that. But it might be that the person could exercise and maybe do leg exercises on one of those small sit on the floor bicycles. So, and all you have to do is kind of put the bike there and let the person pedal. And so you can set it up, they can pedal, and then you can maybe do something else. Or you could have the bicycle in the kitchen where you're at and you're doing something else, and then you can just encourage them, oh, keep it going, or play music on the TV while they're pedaling, and you can have a conversation about where you're going. All of those things can happen, but it doesn't mean that you're doing the best exercise that they could do. You're doing a good exercise that they're benefiting from, that you can fit into your routine.
Sure. All about prioritizing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's all we have time for right now. Bronwyn, any parting words for our families?
Well, I just want to say that we don't often think about routines. We don't often talk about them as challenges. And it's important for us, if we can do that, to do that. You're the team leader of your family members' care, and take that role and bring up all the concerns that you have, and consider your routines and discuss the challenges you have with anybody who will listen.
Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to share this great information with our families. This is a lot of wonderful information that you've provided. I'm sure our families value your input on this topic, as you provided a lot of great information. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and stay tuned for our next Family Matters episode. Goodbye.